I was born and raised here on the west side. My mother's family goes back all the way to before the revolution, as far as I know, as the story's been told to me. My father, God rest his soul, passed away last year. He was from Laredo. Worked in the Matanzas all his life. He used to have this glove. It was like leather up here, and then the hand part was like little links, you know, like a knife. And he used to have this knife. He would sharpen it. Those knives began about this big, and then in about a month were about this thin. He used to debone beef. Started as the floor man killing pigs, but he didn't like it. So he would watch the guys who were cutting the beef, and on his breaks he would ask them, you know, how do you make this cut? How do you do this? How do you do that? Sometimes they would sneak him into their part of the plant. And that was a way that you could rise, you know, in the company, because they weren't going to take care of that. There were no promotions going on to actually give you skills. You had to have them. And his colleagues were the ones that were helping him do that. At that time, that work was handed down from father to son. And if your father was a good worker, then there was a lot of expectation put on you. It meant you had to really keep a good image of that lineage. Now we'll work there during the summers. After the army, came back to that. But you're asking me about the neighborhood. Let's see. You know, you keep asking what streets define it. Where does it end? Where does it begin? The thing is, I can't tell you that. Because San Quilmas is more than that. It is a consciousness. It's a way of life. It's a survival and a people and a state of being. We are a hospitable people. And if you met someone who claimed they were from this part of town anywhere else, oh, well, then a test would begin. You'd have to prove through a series of shared experiences that you really knew what you were talking about. And we had very little growing up. I think most people in this part of town did. And that doesn't mean we didn't take care of our things. There was a great deal of pride about what you did have. But I remember, man, well, you'll still see them. Roofs made of lamina. And sometimes the wind would take it, you know, hurt people. Because yeah, you know, it's that corrugated tin looking stuff. And in the 50s, we still had, do you know what a kerosene lamp is? Here, let me draw it for you. It's like this. Has an adjustable wick. You can make it brighter, dimmer. Also houses. Houses were made with vertical slabs like this, you know, with another thinner slab holding the others in place like this. And then sometimes there would be a hole like this one on the planks, and there was a tube connected to an iron stove inside. And you put logs in there and do everything. Heat water, cook, keep warm. Not that you need to keep that warm in San Antonio, but. And it was possible to see all these little chimney smokes. Nowadays, no one would let you even, you know, they would call the fire department, but everyone was much more mindful back then. Though sometimes the gauge here would clog up, you know, and the smoke would go right into the house. But let me go back to the meat packing, because I think it's important. It's really dangerous work. Not only for the workers, but for the consumer. Because everything used to be, you know, right on the floor, where food could get contaminated. And then they unionized and fought to take everything up in the air, you know, which is much cleaner. But the history of the unions. Now this is really important. Emma Tenayuca, you should know her. The pecan workers. They organized a bunch of sit-downs which the bosses were not too happy about. At that time you get paid something miserable per pound of pecans, which, you know, you had to de-shell and peel. Hard work. And when the bosses decided to cut wages by 1 cent per pound, I mean, can you imagine how much you have to be getting paid if you're striking over 1 cent? Well, they did. And they got gassed and arrested, sent to jail. It lasted something like a month and a half. That October, the owners settled for 25 cents an hour. You know, a respectable wage. And then, of course, a year later, everything got mechanized. Thousands of people were out of work. But it was the beginning of a movement. And I think the roots of the Chicano movement, and of course, of Guadalupe arts. You know, I keep trying to think of what I did when I was young. Because we didn't have TV, all that stuff that you have now. And I remember drawing. I would draw really close to the light when my grandfather told stories. My grandmother talking to Tonto Pete. We called him that because he sold whatever he could out of his cart. Los palitos! Los palitos! And he looked all scraggly and strange. But that guy, he wasn't tonto at all. He made money. And we'd also get excited when the ice guy would come. Ahí viene la hielera! Because we knew Grandma would make us drinks with the water that would drip out of the ice box. She'd put a cloth so that nothing dirty would get in there, below the ice. And we loved that. But to bring it back to Guadalupe, I guess I should explain to you La Raza Unida. In the 70s, the union movement had grown to a consciousness about, you know, empowering Chicanos. And I think it had its emulation of black civil rights. So we knew we had to galvanize people into a political machine because that's what runs this country. And we did. La Raza Unida was a third party, which of course was incredibly threatening to the establishment. In a similar way, our art wasn't being shown in galleries, wasn't being talked about, wasn't quote unquote relevant. Y decíamos, chingao, ¿por qué no me pueden reconocer? Ah, y aceptar. Yelling in the street like a madman. Until I realized there were a couple of others yelling with me. Está bien, we'll do it ourselves. We'll create our own arts movement. So we started in una cantina. But all of a sudden we found ourselves having to know all this funding and grant stuff. And we were visual artists, we didn't know all this word stuff. So we had to really educate ourselves, you know, go back, take English courses, and of course, befriend artists who did understand words. Poets, novelists, playwrights. You know, I see kids now, and I think they're good if you teach them right. And I don't know how I did it, but my kids are great. They're grown up, and I'm really impressed by them. And sometimes I see the kids in their cars or on the street, and I hear their music, you know, the rap or whatever. And I don't get it. It doesn't sound like music to me. But then I force myself to listen, you know, to really listen. And I realize it is art. It's the same guys yelling, screaming, hey, why can't you accept me? Some things don't